Hello everyone and welcome to our first video on C programming. So in this video this is going to be our lab. We'll have this in class, but this is just to kind of discuss about C programming from a different point of view. All right, some of you may already be familiar with Eclipse. The only difference is Eclipse is a little confusing because with some other general IDEs such as Visual Studios, for example, it's one IDE that you can put multiple languages in. Maybe Eclipse will be like there at one point, but right now, as you see at the top here, it says C and C++. So I downloaded a different IDE. Now I have a video posted on the course documents, and we'll go over that in class. That explains how to install Eclipse for C programming. Now, I have put a ticket in to have that installed in the class that I'm teaching this semester for CIT 145. But when you go home and you install it on your personal computer, if you don't have a laptop and brought it to class, then that'll definitely be what you want to do. So we'll kind of get started here. I already have a project built, but I want to start it from scratch so you can see. So what you're going to do is you're going to go up to File, and you don't see that. So you're going to go to File, New, and you're going to choose C Project. Okay, now you will see this right here. You can name it whatever you want to name it. I'll just say C test. All right. Now you have these different things, and we'll talk about this in class about the GCC and stuff like that. In this case, we're just going to do empty project, and you're going to choose the Mac OS X GCC. Now Linux has a GCC, which is their compiler that is only available in Linux. However, if you have a Mac, it'll be Mac OS X GCC. If you have Windows, it'll be that, and then other operating systems may have something equivalent. Click Next. We'll just choose Yes for debug and finish, and release, finish. All right. So now I have my little project right here. If I right click on it and do New and choose Source File, you want to name it whatever, something meaningful, but in this case, it's our first project, so I'm going to say first, let's see, first C program, and then I'm going to put a .c at the end of it, okay, hit finish, great. So now we have, what's really cool about this is we will talk about comments, and most of you are probably really familiar with comments within Java. So it already has that. So it has the name of my program. So I could put name of program right there. And then I'll probably change this up a little bit. And I'll follow a different format. I'll say developer, Jeff Seaman. See here, date created. August 20th. Actually, we'll go with September 1st. It's not there yet. We're getting there. All right. And then you'll put a description. This is my first C program in Eclipse. This is for CIT 145. Perfect. So now we have that description up here. Now we could come down here and actually write our code. Not sure why it does that. Anyways, nonetheless. Actually, let me see something here. All right, so now we're going to write some code here. All right, so we're going to get started with the first thing that we start with. Let's see here. All right, so we're going to start off with, and we'll talk about this in class. We'll start off with include stdio. I'll talk about this in a second here, what this is. All right, so for starters, include is something that is always required. So when we're talking about include, it's basically what includes is it's a little bit different. So when you already guys already know Java and you're importing libraries, well, this is kind of similar. It's includes is from the C language. It's a standard input-output library. In order to use a statement, you have to use the input-output. It doesn't have it built in to C, so you have to use this library in order for it to know what it has to do, in a sense. We'll get in a little bit more about .h, but for now, it's just considered a header file. Now you have to have the pound here, or the hash, which is a directive, and we'll talk about that in our lecture, what that does and what that means. So the program uses the includes, as I mentioned, in the C language. So the code that starts with the name main, which we'll get into here in a second, think about the main function in other words. It's basically the same thing as if you're doing Java, you know, you're doing your public static void main. It's your main concept. It's what starts the program. So in this case, when we're doing C language, in the first bit of code that runs when the program runs, the function name is always followed by a pair of parentheses, and the code to be run is enclosed between that pair of brackets. So what we're going to do here is we're going to type int for integer, which is a data type, and we're going to say main, and we're going to say, in this case, we're just going to do open close brackets. Okay, first of all, what does that say right there, what we're doing? It says that we're not passing any parameters. So it says that we're declaring something. Well, let's actually get it started here. So get rid of that underline. So we're saying that no matter what, we're starting off our declaration or our main procedure with an int for integer. And that right there tells me one thing. Even though I don't know C, well, I know C, but let's say hypothetically you're going into it and you don't know C programming language. You look at it, first thing you're going to think is, okay, why am I starting off with ints and why am I not starting off with like a public or something like that? This must be returning some type of integer value, and that's exactly right. It can be used to return some type of zero value or numeric value, whatever the case is. In addition to that, main is our main function. This right here is kind of like in a sense, it tells us if we're passing in parameters, but we're not passing any parameters. The curly braces is the beginning of the block. It's saying, hey, you know what? Let's begin this code, and this ends it. But in between here is going to be something called statements, and this is where our code is processed. In a sense, hopefully that makes some sense right off the bat. So another reason we need the include, and going back to this, we need this here is because I mentioned it's a directive, but what it does is it communicates with the preprocessor, and the preprocessor has to obtain this information to know what it's doing in order to do its next steps. So it's the sense of how things work within C is not as quick as if you're programming in Java, if you're programming in .NET and so forth. Those languages have come a long way where C is pretty basic in a sense. But anyways, kind of getting back to this. All right, so we will start writing some code here. We're not going to do much. So if we type in printf, which is a function that we'll talk about here shortly, we'll just say hello world. You know, nothing fancy. \n. Let's go with semicolon. So as you see here, we ended a semicolon. Just like in Java, it terminates a statement. As you see, we have the hello world with the \n. We're saying it's a string of characters passed between the brackets. And the printf function in the end displays a new line. So printf is as you see here when you click on it, you're calling a method. or they call it subroutine, whatever the case is. In this case, it's a function. It's a built-in function. Also could be considered a method. And it does something specific. It says, pass me in something, and then you know what? I'll display it on the screen. Now you notice here we do a /n. Only reason we do that is so that we create a new line. So if we want to add something else, we could easily do that. The printf is a function in studio.h. So it's coming from this standard input-output library, allows us to be able to utilize it. In addition, here's our ending statements. This says, hey, you know what? Code's over and we're done. We're completed. We've did what we want to do. But there's something else that we want to include in here. And we have printf, but we also want to return a zero value in this case, because we're saying that we're using an integer, so we need to return something. We'll return 0. So if we hit play, okay, so we have printf hello world return. So if we hit play, the button up here, so if you go up here and click on this, you could actually want to click run, so it runs your program. And as you see here, it came up hello world. Pretty simple. Now let's take off the return 0 and see what happens. We'll uncomment that and hit run again. Just modify it, and it works perfectly fine. We don't have to return a 0 value, but it's best practice to do something like that because you're using it as an integer. So you want it to return something. It doesn't have to return a number. In this case, we're returning something. So if they call that procedure, then you know they're expecting some type of number to come back. Now, we didn't put any arguments in here, but we could have put arguments in there to make it do different things. But in this case, we just made it pretty simple. So hopefully this is just the basis. I'll have other videos, but this is just to kind of get started within your first C programming. Thanks for listening.